Within this session, we are going to be focusing on the philosophical and non-religious challenges posed by belief in God's goodness, free will, and the existence of evil and suffering. First and foremost, we're going to start off by looking at David Hume and the inconsistent triad. Within his inconsistent triad, David Hume is focusing specifically on the nature of God. He looks at the Christian perspective that both God is omnipotent and omnibenevolent, and he does this in light of the existence of evil. David Hume states that because we know that evil exists, God therefore cannot be both omnipotent and omnibenevolent. So God cannot be all-powerful and all-loving because of the fact that evil exists. Therefore, David Hume states that God is either omnibenevolent, so he's all-loving, and is not powerful enough to stop evil, or God is omnipotent, so he is all-powerful, and he is therefore not omnibenevolent. So God does not love his creation enough to stop evil from existing. Just to reiterate what we have stated on the previous slide, in terms of the inconsistent triad, David Hume states that God cannot be both omnipotent and omnibenevolent, as if this was true, then evil would not exist. However, due to the human experience, we know that evil does exist, and so at least one of the other must be false. David Hume therefore states that either God is omnibenevolent and wants to stop evil, but then he must not be omnipotent, or God is omnipotent and can stop evil and suffering, but then he must not be omnibenevolent. The next approach we are going to have a look at in terms of our philosophical and non-religious challenges posed by belief in God's goodness, free will, and the existence of evil and suffering is that of J.L. Mackie, and specifically J.L. Mackie's responses to the problem of evil. As you may remember from studying this, J.L. Mackie responds specifically to the Christian perspective in accordance to the existence or the origin of evil and suffering. So the first Christian perspective that we are going to focus on is the notion that evil is necessary as an opposite of good. So therefore it is a point of comparison and helps us to appreciate good. We see this, for example, within St. Augustine and his key text of the Triad. In regards to this, J.L. Mackie responds and he states that there are lots of examples of goodness within the world which are easily noticed without needing a contrast with evil. He then goes on to say that there is too much evil and suffering in the world required for there to be a comparison to the good in the world. And in accordance to this, some of the examples of evil are far worse than needed. So the next Christian perspective we're going to focus on is that of how evil helps us to become a better person. And as you may recall, we are taught by St. Paul within his letter to the Romans, and it's again reiterated by Pope John Paul II, that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. So essentially, evil does help us to become a better person. In accordance to this, J.L. Mackie responds, and he specifically questions why God would need to make humans better through experiencing evil and suffering. In regards to this, he refers to a process known as moral degradation, whereby suffering makes people worse and not better. So the third and final Christian perspective that we're going to be focusing on is that evil is a consequence of free will. And as you may recall, within Christianity, when we talk about the origin and the existence of evil, we refer to how evil is a consequence of free will. So how God made humans with free will, as we see in Genesis 2, and then how evil is a consequence of this, later on being seen within both Genesis 3. In regards to this, J.L. Mackie responds, and he specifically questions why God could not make free humans who always choose good instead of evil. He argues that experiencing evil and suffering is far too high a price to pay for having free will. If we were going to critique this specifically, we could see the fact that, of course, if God made humans who were only able to choose good instead of evil, this would therefore not be free will, and therefore is contradictory within his claims.